Okay, welcome back. We got into the what's happening now and some of the consequences on the ground, but I'm going to ask you, Mike, and then go around the table with some other practical questions, including how constituents would feel about it. But if we've established that they don't have both the wherewithal, the training, the material, or the men here to, in effect, defend key areas, and if we've also established that it doesn't, what happens in Iraq doesn't stay in Iraq, that this is going beyond it, are we faced with the unthinkable that maybe we got to go back in?
Well, go back in is defined as what? What
would you define something that would be an actionable force that can accomplish a mission, not just to politically respond to criticism, but actually, I don't know what an overwhelming force would be, but to defeat ISIS?
Well, so Rich, right now, the U.S. military and the Air Force in particular has proven to be ineffective to affect the outcome on the ground. Based on what happened over the weekend, they attacked during a sandstorm. The pilots can't fly. So what's got to happen first and foremost
is the U.S. military wants to beat anyone, we can, right?
That's right. And so we've got to decide that that's important enough to do, and then commit to doing that. Raise taxes, you know, all the things that go with that. We hardly did that when we went to Iraq on the first place, when you think about it. So. But the point is this, we've got to get more people there that are at least a little bit closer to the battlefield. And right now, we are not even in the same neighborhood. We're inside of Baghdad. We're in the green zone. We're in certain areas that have no impact on what's exactly going on the ground. We've got to get people on the ground that can actually bring those planes in and hit specific targets. We've got to get better planners there. Let the Iraqis understand that, look, you want to defend Ramadi, a place like this, you've got to do this on a consistent basis. Things seem to sneak up constantly on this government, and they don't know what to do.
To sketch out a number here, how many more troops would we have to put in, and in what with capacity?
Yeah, you're looking at least 3,000 to 6,000 more, 10,000 troops that are in different positions doing, no one's doing any fighting yet, no one's actually fighting against the enemy, but setting up the infrastructure, the logistics, the communications, the planning, the operations, and providing ministerial guidance to a very poor and inexperienced Iraqi higher command and military.
I have two questions. The first is, why should we care to send in American troops if the people of Iraq don't seem to care? If they're not reacting to ISIS the way they reacted when we were there, if the army can't seem to hold it, and if the people aren't seeming to fight back, why should we care and the wider Muslim world doesn't seem to care, or at least hasn't gotten motivated to do something in their neighborhood? Why should we do it?
Well, first of all, we did have something to do with creating the problems in Iraq right now. So I think from our American exceptionalism situation, we feel that we've got to do something. But there's no other country that has either the wherewithal or the foresight to see what could potentially happen here. You're right. Saudi Arabia should be more involved. You've got the Iranians, but the Iranians are just going to wait until the very last minute. They're trying to get a nuclear deal done. But frankly, these other countries can't. They can't get there from here because they've, you know, even Jordan. These Middle Eastern countries are ruled by people that don't necessarily have control over the people.
I want to bring you guys into this. You go to your district, okay? People see horrible images of what's going on the ground right there. People see the same ground that Mike and the military fought, and we lost a lot of American lives to take, and they're seeing them go. Even if they don't care what happens over there, we've seen enough right now, and nobody has to remind us that it doesn't stay there, right? Is there any appetite in a limited, defined mission, if there's such a thing, right, for us to go back and try and fix this before it gets worse?
I'm not sure. I really don't know. I think you would need someone to really sell it to the majority of the American people. I believe there's some subset that say, no, we're not going to do it again, even if you make the case. But I think there is a substantial enough number that is outraged by what they see visually and the threat of this a state coming at the concept that this armed group is going to create a state is I think is very threatening to many people. And I think if there's a true persuasion campaign, some subset of the American people will go along. But I think the American population is very, very divided about going back.
And Dominic, as we know, for any president in his second term, especially in the last 2 years of it, it's about the legacy mode. This just has the feeling that this is going to be the story we're going to be talking about for the next 6 months, okay?
No doubt about it, Richard.
So with that there, and the imagery getting worse, not better, okay? You know how momentum works over there. Can the president just say, hey, let's not set our hair on fire, guys, let it go? And not just the McCains, but others are saying, you got to do something about this. Because you can't blame the prior president anymore, fair or not. He's inherited the situation. The next president's going to inherit what he gives them.
Well, I'm glad you pointed that out. Mr. Obama inherited this situation, but when you've been the president for almost 2 full terms, it's now your situation. The point that Mike made earlier, I think, is really relevant. The U.S. and the few others that are involved are losing the public relations battle in terms of who's winning and who's losing. And the U.S. cannot be in a position like that. There's just no... So I'm glad you brought up legacy, because right after Obamacare and first black president, if this issue continues, I mean, we don't know. I mean, I don't see a scenario where he's going to commit to ground troops, but you know, who knows? But the question I had was, with ISIS and you know, the U.S. only committing to an air attack, why do that? I know that the Americans don't have the stomach for another war, but why do that when they had to know that that wasn't enough? Because the criticism that we're hearing from people like you now is what you articulated when the U.S. first started this, that the air attack would not be enough.
Yeah, and if anything, if we waged war like we used to wage war, the air attack could be enough. You could carpet bomb 5 square miles, you'd kill a lot of civilians, and eventually you would root this enemy out. But we're just not willing to do that at this point. You've got a president, we had one president, George Bush, that went probably too far inside of Iraq by going in. And that question's been asked by every politician in the last week, and they've all fumbled over it. But now let's look on the other side. This president, frankly, is probably overcorrected the other way. Because had we had the 10,000 troops there to begin with, I just don't think we'd see any of this right now.
What happens after we defeat ISIS? Let's say we commit the troops that we need. We defeat ISIS. I mean, every time we go into a Middle Eastern country, whether it's Libya and helping to topple Gaddafi, or Iraq, or name the country, the enemy that we go after goes away.
Right.
We leave, and then a vacuum comes in, and some other evil entity or enemy entity takes hold. I mean, we can't keep 10, 20, 30,000 American troops in Iraq indefinitely.
Well, you can't.
Well,
you can't.
We did
Definitely can't. Look at Korea, Andrew. I mean, you know how long Korea's been over?
I don't think that's particularly helpful in our long-term strategy.
We're going to have to make some real hard choices. For example, the Rand McNally map of the Middle East is probably gone. Okay? Yes. That's the first issue, and let's come to grips with that. There's this Kurdistan region that likely wants to be a nation state. How does that happen? That's going to involve Turkey and Iran. So the diplomacy that has to happen in order for it to have peace there is going to, you know, besides winning a Nobel Prize, is going to have to be tremendous. Now, again, let's see ISIS threaten Israel and watch what happens. Let's see, and then let's see what people feel about the United States once that happens. Because, again, as you talk about being surrounded by enemies, this is now an enemy that's going to go after them.
How about just stay in Iraq? Yeah. What happens if they move towards Baghdad?
Right.
Now we have U.S. assets on the ground over there. For anybody, the only thing I know will happen, and you forgot more than I know, this doesn't end in Ramadi. This is going to keep growing. It's going to keep getting worse. We keep getting all the ancillary stories about recruiting in the States and trying to have a field presence. We hear from our own intelligence agencies about sleeper agents and the rest here. This is going to get worse, and the idea of just taking the approach, well, let's not set our hair on fire, I don't know what the answer is, but I know that ain't it. And unfortunately, I think it's going to be a hot summer that we're going to be talking about this issue the whole time. Unfortunately, I don't have more of time, but Mike, as always, thank you. And just a programming note here. On Monday, we've got a special Memorial Day for you program right here on RFL. Mike's a part of it as well, and I strongly urge you to stick around, because no matter you like the war or not, we love the warrior in terms of the soldiers and the ultimate sacrifices they made. We recognize on Memorial Day. Thank you again, Mike. Okay, when we come back, everybody, we'll switch gears to politics and closer to home. Another amazing head scratcher from Chris Christie as Dominic smiles. First, he said bad poll numbers mean that New Jersey voters, they just want to keep him at home. Now, he wants an apology from Bridgegate. He wants the apology, saying he's the wrong party. Stay with us.